and the mangroves twisted their roots into the murky waters like ancient fingers grasping for secrets long buried, lived a single mother named Elena Ramirez. She was 32, with sun-kissed skin from years of outdoor labor, dark hair that cascaded in wild waves down her back, and eyes that held the weary determination of someone who had fought tooth and nail for every scrap of stability in her life. Elena had come to the Everglades not by choice but by necessity, after her husband's abrupt departure 5 years prior. Leaving her with a toddler and a mountain of debts, she had taken a job as a tour guide for one of the local airboat companies. It wasn't glamorous work, navigating the swampy channels, pointing out alligators sunning themselves on logs, and reciting facts about the delicate ecosystem to wide-eyed tourists, but it paid the bills, just barely. Her son, Mateo, was now 7, a bright-eyed boy with an insatiable curiosity about the wildlife that surrounded their modest trailer home on the edge of the national park. Elena's days were a blur of early mornings, packing lunches, dropping Mateo at school, and then heading out into the wilderness, where the line between beauty and danger blurred like the horizon at dusk. She loved the Everglades in her own way. It was a place of raw, untamed life, where birdsong competed with the distant roar of gators and the water hyacinths bloomed in vibrant purple against the green expanse. But beneath that affection lurked a quiet fear. The swamp was unforgiving, a labyrinth of channels and sawgrass that could swallow a person whole if they weren't careful. Elena knew the stories: hikers who vanished without a trace, boats capsized in hidden currents, and the ever-present threat of invasive species like the Burmese pythons that had overrun the area, slithering silently through the underbrush, growing to monstrous sizes on a diet of native fauna. She had seen them herself on occasion, coiled in the branches or gliding across the water, their scales glistening like oil slicks. The locals whispered about them, calling them swamp demons, and Elena always made sure to carry a machete on her hip during tours, though she hoped she'd never have to use it. One fateful afternoon in late summer, with a sky heavy with the promise of rain, Elena set out on what should have been a routine solo scouting trip. The airboat company had asked her to check a remote section of the Glades for potential new tour routes, areas where the water levels had risen after recent storms, creating new pathways through the mangroves. Mateo was at a neighbor's house, safe and sound, playing with their dog while Elena promised to be back before dinner. She kissed his forehead, ruffled his hair, and whispered, "Te quiero, mi amor," before revving the airboat's engine and disappearing into the haze. The Everglades welcomed her with its usual symphony, the buzz of insects, the splash of fish jumping, and the occasional cry of a heron piercing the stillness. Elena navigated with practiced ease, her hands steady on the controls, her eyes scanning for landmarks, a twisted cypress here, a cluster of air plants there. But as the hours ticked by, the weather turned. Dark clouds rolled in faster than expected, unleashing a torrent of rain that turned the waterways into churning rivers. Visibility dropped to near zero, and Elena's airboat hit a submerged log, jolting her forward and damaging the propeller. Panic set in slowly, like the rising water around her ankles. She radioed for help, but the storm interfered with the signal, her calls dissolving into static. Stranded, she had no choice but to abandon the boat and wade toward what she hoped was higher ground, her machete in hand, slashing at the thick vegetation that clawed at her clothes. The mud sucked at her boots, each step a battle, and the rain pounded relentlessly, turning the world into a watery blur. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time lost meaning in the deluge. Elena thought of Mateo, his laughter, his small hands clutching her leg when he was scared. She pushed on, driven by that image, but the Everglades had other plans. In the dim light filtering through the canopy, she spotted movement, a massive shadow uncoiling from the roots of a mangrove. It was a python, easily 18 feet long, its body as thick as her thigh, eyes like cold beads fixed on her. Elena froze, heart hammering. She knew better than to run. Pythons were ambush predators, striking with lightning speed. Backing away slowly, she gripped her machete tighter, but the snake lunged, its jaws unhinging in a blur of fangs and muscle. She swung wildly, connecting with its side, but it was too late. The coils wrapped around her legs, pulling her down into the muck. The struggle was fierce. Elena fought with every ounce of strength, screaming into the storm, but the python's grip tightened, squeezing the air from her lungs. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. Mateo's face, the last thing she saw before the world went black. In the days that followed, search parties combed the Everglades, helicopters buzzing overhead, volunteers wading through the swamps with dogs and drones. Elena's disappearance made local headlines. Single mom vanishes in storm-ravaged Everglades. Mateo stayed with his aunt, crying himself to sleep each night, clutching his mother's favorite scarf. The community rallied, holding vigils and fundraisers, but as weeks turned to months, hope faded. The official search was called off after 3 weeks, citing the impossible terrain and lack of leads. Rumors swirled. Some said she had run away, overwhelmed by the pressures of single parenthood. Others whispered of foul play, perhaps a disgruntled ex or a poacher. But the truth lay hidden in the depths of the swamp, where the python, sated from its meal, slithered away to digest in peace. Life in the Everglades continued its relentless cycle. Tourists came and went, alligators basked, and the pythons multiplied, their invasive presence a growing ecological nightmare. Elena's trailer sat empty, weeds overtaking the yard, a forlorn reminder of what was lost. Mateo grew quieter, his curiosity dimmed, spending hours staring at maps of the glades, tracing possible paths his mother might have taken. His aunt tried to shield him from the harsher theories, but the boy overheard whispers at school, kids teasing him about the swamp monster that ate his mom. It hardened him, planting seeds of resolve that would one day bloom into action. Meanwhile, deep in the mangroves, the python grew even larger, its body distended with the slow process of digestion. Bones and remnants that couldn't be broken down formed a strange bulge in its midsection, a macabre trophy of its conquest. The snake avoided open areas, lurking in the shadows, evading the python hunters who patrolled the park in an effort to control the population. These hunters, rugged men and women armed with hooks and bags, had removed thousands of the serpents over the years, but for every one caught, dozens more hatched in the warm, wet environment. The Everglades was their paradise, a place where they had no natural predators, feasting on rabbits, deer, and occasionally larger prey. As the seasons changed, fall giving way to winter's mild chill, the bulge in the python's belly persisted, a testament to the size of its last meal. Birds nested nearby, oblivious to the danger below, and fish darted in the shallow waters. The ecosystem, already strained by human encroachment and climate change, absorbed this tragedy like so many before it. Elena's story became one of those cautionary tales told around campfires. Always respect the glades, never go alone, watch for the silent killers. But for Mateo, it was no tale, it was his reality, a void that no amount of time could fill. He dreamed of her often, vivid nightmares where he wandered the swamps calling her name, only to find shadows and silence. His aunt enrolled him in counseling, but the sessions did little to ease the ache. School became a battleground. He lashed out at bullies, earning suspensions that only isolated him further. Yet, in quiet moments, he pored over books about reptiles, learning everything he could about Burmese pythons, their habits, their weaknesses, their role in the invasion that had turned the Everglades into a battleground. He vowed silently to one day join the hunters, to rid the swamp of the beasts that had stolen his mother. As spring approached, bringing with it bursts of color from blooming orchids and the return of migratory birds, the python stirred from its torpor. The bulge had shifted, partially digested, but still prominent, a lump that hindered its movement slightly. It ventured closer to human trails, drawn by the scent of easy prey, stray dogs or unattended livestock. Park rangers noted an uptick in sightings, issuing warnings to hikers and boaters. The media picked up on it, running segments about the python plague, interviewing experts who warned of the ecological disaster unfolding. Elena's case was revisited in one such report, a cold case file dusted off for dramatic effect, with photos of her smiling face juxtaposed against footage of writhing snakes. Mateo watched it all, fists clenched, a fire burning in his young heart. He begged his aunt to take him on a guided tour, to see the places where his mother had worked, but she refused, too afraid of stirring up more pain. Undeterred, he snuck out one weekend, hitchhiking to the park entrance and wandering the boardwalks, eyes peeled for any sign. The Everglades whispered to him, a chorus of wind through the sawgrass, promising answers if he listened close enough. But the swamp kept its secrets, the python long gone to deeper waters. Months turned into a year, the anniversary of Elena's disappearance marked by a small memorial service at the trailer park. Friends and family gathered, sharing stories of her laughter, her strength, her unwavering love for Mateo. The boy, now 8, stood stoically, placing flowers on a makeshift altar, his resolve hardening like the calluses on a hunter's hands. That same week, a group of python hunters, part of the state's removal program, ventured into a remote section of the glades, following tips from locals about a massive snake spotted near an old airboat trail. They moved methodically, eyes scanning the underbrush, hooks at the ready. The leader, a grizzled veteran named Jack Harlan, had been hunting pythons for a decade, removing over 500 himself. He knew the signs: disturbed vegetation, shed skins, the faint musk in the air. As they pushed through a thicket of mangroves, they spotted it, a colossal Burmese python, coiled around the base of a tree, its body swollen with that strange bulge. It was the largest they'd seen in months, easily 20 feet, with patterns of brown and gold blending seamlessly into the surroundings. The team approached cautiously, hearts pounding, knowing one wrong move could turn deadly. The snake sensed them, lifting its head, tongue flicking to taste the air. Jack signaled, and they struck, hooks latching onto the body as the python thrashed wildly, coils whipping like cables. It took all 4 hunters to subdue it, pinning it down and securing its head in a bag. Panting and sweat-soaked, they examined their catch, noting the unusual protrusion in its midsection. "Looks like it ate something big," Jack muttered. "Maybe a deer or a hog." But as they transported it back to base for euthanasia and necropsy, curiosity grew. The bulge was hard, not the soft give of recent prey, suggesting whatever was inside had been there a while, partially digested but preserved in the snake's slow metabolism. Word spread quickly through the ranger station, and soon the media was involved, sensing a story. Monster python captured in Everglades. What's inside its belly? The headline screamed. Mateo saw the report on TV, his aunt trying to change the channel, but he insisted, eyes wide with a mix of horror and hope. Could it be? The thought was too gruesome, too surreal, but the location matched, the area where his mother had vanished. He pleaded with his aunt to call the authorities, to demand they check. Reluctantly, she did, and the wheels of investigation turned once more. At the lab, veterinarians and biologists gathered for the necropsy, cameras rolling for documentation. They slit the python open carefully, the stench of decay filling the room. Amid the slurry of digested matter, they found bones, human bones, fragmented but identifiable. A skull, ribs, a femur with remnants of clothing fabric clinging to it. Gasps echoed as they unearthed a necklace, a simple silver chain with a cross pendant, engraved with ER, Elena's initials. Dental records confirmed it the next day. The remains were those of Elena Ramirez. The news hit like a thunderclap, reopening wounds that had barely scabbed over. Mateo collapsed when told, sobbing in his aunt's arms, the finality crushing yet oddly relieving. The not knowing had been worse. The story exploded nationally. Single mom's fate revealed in python's belly after year-long mystery. Experts explained how pythons could consume large prey, their jaws dislocating to swallow whole, digestion taking months for big meals. Elena had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, a victim of nature's indifference. The discovery sparked renewed calls for python control, with bounties increased and more. Hunters recruited. Mateo, though devastated, found purpose in the tragedy. He spoke at press conferences, his small voice steady. "My mom loved the Everglades, But these snakes don't belong here. We have to fight them. He joined youth programs for conservation, learning to track and remove invasives, turning grief into action. The python, now a specimen in a museum, served as a stark reminder of the delicate balance in the wild. Elena's spirit lingered in the swamps, in the wind and water, watching over her son as he grew into a guardian of the land she once called home. The Everglades endured, a place of beauty and peril, where life and death danced in eternal rhythm, and stories like Elena's became. The discovery of Elena Ramirez's remains inside the massive Burmese python sent shockwaves through the small community on the edge of the Everglades, where life revolved around the rhythms of the swamp. The trailer park where Elena and Mateo had lived became a focal point for reporters, curious onlookers, and conservationists, all drawn to the tragedy that had unfolded in the wild heart of Florida. Mateo, now living permanently with his aunt, Sophia, found himself at the center of this storm, his young face plastered across news channels as the boy who lost his mother to a swamp demon. Sophia, a stout woman with a no-nonsense demeanor forged from years of working as a nurse, did her best to shield him from the media frenzy, but it was like trying to hold back the tide. Reporters camped outside their home, their cameras flashing like predators' eyes in the dark, asking for interviews, for sound bites, for any scrap of emotion they could package into a headline. Mateo hated it. Their pity, their questions, the way they spoke of his mother as if she were just a story, not a person who sang him lullabies or taught him how to spot an egret's nest. But beneath his grief and anger, a fire was kindling, one that would shape his future in ways no one could predict. Sophia noticed the change in him. The way he stopped playing with other kids, the hours he spent sketching snakes in his notebook, their scales meticulously detailed, their eyes cold and unyielding. He'd sit on the porch at dusk, staring into the distance where the sawgrass met the sky, as if he could will his mother back from the swamp. The community, tight-knit despite its rough edges, rallied around them in the aftermath. Neighbors brought casseroles, held prayer circles, and organized fundraisers to help Sophia cover bills, knowing Elena's modest income had been the family's lifeline. But the Everglades itself loomed larger than ever, its presence inescapable, a living entity that gave and took without mercy. The python hunters, emboldened by the high-profile capture, intensified their efforts, scouring the wetlands with renewed vigor. Jack Harlan, the veteran who had led the team that found the snake, became something of a local celebrity, though he shunned the spotlight, preferring the quiet of the swamp to TV interviews. He visited Mateo one evening, bringing a small carved alligator as a gift, and told the boy stories of tracking pythons, how they could hide in plain sight, their bodies blending with roots and shadows, how they struck without warning. Mateo listened, wide-eyed, absorbing every word, his fear of the creatures morphing into a grim fascination. "They're not evil," Jack said, his voice rough as gravel. "They're just doing what they're built for. Problem is, they don't belong here." Those words stuck with Mateo, planting a seed that the real enemy wasn't just the snakes, but the imbalance they represented, a disruption humans had caused by bringing them to this alien land. Meanwhile, the Everglades continued its slow churn, indifferent to the human drama unfolding on its edges. The rainy season gave way to drier months, and the water levels dropped, exposing mudflats where crabs scuttled and wading birds hunted. The python population, estimated in the tens of thousands, remained a growing threat, their numbers fueled by a lack of natural predators and an abundance of prey. Conservationists sounded alarms, pointing to decimated populations of raccoons, possums, and even alligators, all falling victim to the snake's insatiable hunger. Elena's death became a rallying cry for funding, with state officials allocating more resources to the python elimination program. Volunteers poured in, from college students to retirees, armed with hooks and burlap sacks, trudging through the muck in search of the elusive invaders. But the swamp was vast, over 1 million acres of tangled wilderness, and for every python caught, countless others slipped away, their coils vanishing into the undergrowth. Mateo, too young to join the hunts, begged Sophia to let him tag along, promising to stay safe, But she refused. Her own fear of the glades deepened by her sister's fate. Instead, she enrolled him in an after-school program at the local community center, hoping to distract him with science projects and sports. But Mateo's mind was elsewhere, always drifting back to the swamp, to the python that had changed everything. He started sneaking library books about herpetology, reading late into the night about constrictors, their muscle structure, their hunting patterns. He learned how Burmese pythons could go months without eating, how their slow metabolism allowed them to grow to monster sizes, how females could lay up to 100 eggs in a single clutch. The knowledge both terrified and empowered him, as if understanding the enemy could somehow bring him closer to his mother. At school, he faced whispers and stares, kids calling him Snake Boy, or worse, but he ignored them, his focus razor-sharp. One teacher, Ms. Carter, a biology enthusiast with a passion for conservation, noticed his intensity and took him under her wing, sharing articles about invasive species and teaching him how to use a field guide. She saw in Mateo a spark, a potential to turn pain into purpose, and encouraged him to channel his grief into learning. Mateo began keeping a journal, not just of facts but of his dreams, vivid, haunting visions of his mother standing in the swamp, her machete gleaming, facing down a sea of serpents. In those dreams, she was fearless, a warrior of the glades, and he woke with a mix of sorrow and determination to honor her. The media frenzy eventually faded, replaced by newer tragedies, but Elena's story lingered in the collective memory of the Everglades community. Tourists still came, drawn by the allure of the wild, though airboat operators now carried extra precautions, radios with backup batteries, GPS trackers, and mandatory training on python encounters. Elena's old company retired her boat, naming it Elena's Spirit and painting it with a mural of her smiling face, a tribute that brought Sophia to tears when she saw it. Mateo, however, found no comfort in the gesture. It was a reminder of what he'd lost, not a celebration of what she'd been. He started visiting the swamp's edge on his own, against Sophia's wishes, standing at the boardwalk's end and tossing pebbles into the water, whispering promises to his mother. "I'll make it right, Mama," he'd say, his voice barely audible over the hum of insects. The Everglades listened, its winds carrying his words into the vastness, where they mingled with the calls of herons and the rustle of sawgrass. The python that had taken Elena was gone, its remains dissected and studied, but its kin thrived, hidden in the shadows of cypress domes and mangrove tunnels. Researchers at the university analyzing the snake's stomach contents found traces of other prey, deer, rabbits, even a small alligator, confirming its status as an apex predator. The discovery fueled debates about the future of the Everglades, with some advocating for extreme measures like introducing mongoose or other predators to control the pythons, though experts warned of further ecological chaos. Mateo overheard these debates on the radio, his young mind grappling with the complexity of it all. He began writing letters to local papers, his handwriting neat but urgent, calling for more action, more hunters, more education about the snakes. "My mom didn't have to die," he wrote in one, published in the Miami Herald, sparking a flood of responses from readers moved by his courage. Sophia, torn between pride and worry, framed the clipping but begged him to slow down, to be a kid for a little longer. But Mateo couldn't stop. The swamp had taken too much, and he felt its pull, a call to fight back. As the second anniversary of Elena's disappearance approached, the community planned another memorial, this time with a focus on conservation. Mateo insisted on speaking, despite Sophia's hesitation, and worked with Ms. Carter to prepare a presentation about invasive species, complete with slides showing the python's impact on native wildlife. He practiced in front of the mirror, his voice steadying with each rehearsal, channeling his mother's strength. The event drew a crowd, locals, rangers, even a few python hunters, including Jack Harlan, who nodded approvingly as Mateo spoke. "We can't bring my mom back," he said, his eyes scanning the faces before him. "But we can protect this place she loved. We have to." The applause was thunderous, and for the first time in months, Mateo felt a flicker of hope, a sense that he wasn't alone in his fight. The Everglades, vast and untamed, stretched out beyond the gathering, its waters reflecting the setting sun, hiding its secrets in plain sight. Mateo knew the battle was far from over, but he was ready to carry his mother's legacy forward, one step, one snake, one truth at a time. Years passed like the slow flow of the Everglades waters, carving new paths through the landscape of Mateo Ramirez's life. Now a teenager at 15, Mateo had grown tall and lean, his once boyish features sharpened by the sun and the relentless pursuit of purpose that had defined him since his mother's tragic end. Living with Aunt Sophia in the same trailer park, though now with a fresh coat of paint and a small garden where Elena's favorite hibiscus bloomed in defiant red, Mateo balanced school with volunteer work at the national park. He had become a fixture among the python hunters, starting as a spotter when he was 12, too young for the dangerous captures but old enough to learn the signs. The drag marks in the mud, the shed skins papery and translucent, the eerie silence where birds should sing, signaling a predator nearby. Jack Harlan, now retired but still mentoring from the sidelines, had taken Mateo under his wing, teaching him the art of the hunt, how to move quietly through the sawgrass, how to use thermal cameras at night when the snake's cold blood stood out against the warm ground, how to humanely euthanize a captured python with a captive bolt gun. "It's not about revenge, kid," Jack would say, his voice gravelly from years of swamp air. "It's about balance. Your mom wouldn't want you out here hating. She'd want you protecting." Mateo nodded, but deep down, the hate simmered, a fuel that drove him harder than any lecture. He had joined the Florida Python Challenge, an annual event where amateurs and pros competed to remove as many snakes as possible, winning his age group's prize 2 years running with captures that impressed even the veterans. The media revisited his story periodically, dubbing him the Snake Slayer's son, a title he despised for its sensationalism but tolerated for the awareness it brought. Sophia worried constantly, her nursing shifts leaving her exhausted, but she saw the fire in his eyes and knew smothering it would only make it burn wilder. She made him promise to always hunt in pairs, to carry a satellite phone, to come home before dark. Mateo agreed, but the Everglades called to him like a siren's song, its vastness a place where he felt closest to Elena, imagining her spirit in the rustle of leaves or the glide of an egret overhead. The ecosystem itself had evolved in those years, strained further by climate change, rising sea levels pushing saltwater into freshwater marshes, altering habitats and making the pythons even more adaptable. Researchers documented pythons swimming miles offshore, their bodies buoyant in the brackish waters, preying on seabirds and even dolphins in rare cases. The native wildlife suffered, marsh rabbits nearly extinct in some areas, bobcats and panthers competing for dwindling prey, alligators occasionally falling victim to the largest serpents in brutal underwater battles. Mateo attended seminars at the university, soaking up data from biologists who mapped pythons spread using radio collars and citizen science apps. He contributed his own sightings, becoming a junior researcher of sorts, his fieldwork earning him college credits through a special program. At school, he excelled in biology and environmental science, his essays on invasive species winning awards, but socially he remained aloof, his peers viewing him as the weird swamp kid who smelled of mud and carried a snake hook in his backpack. He had a few friends, fellow misfits who joined him on weekend hikes, but romance eluded him. The girls at school whispered about his intensity, his scars from minor bites and scrapes, seeing danger where he saw duty. One girl, Lila, a transfer student with a passion for photography, broke through his shell, tagging along on hunts to document the pythons for a school project. She captured images of Mateo wrestling a 10-footer, his muscles straining, face set in determination, photos that went viral on social media and drew more volunteers to the cause. Lila's presence softened him, her laughter a reminder that life wasn't just about the fight, but Mateo kept his heart guarded, afraid the swamp would claim anyone he loved. As he delved deeper into the world of conservation, Mateo uncovered the origins of the python invasion, irresponsible pet owners releasing Burmese pythons bought as exotic novelties, the snakes escaping during Hurricane Andrew in 1992 when a breeding facility was destroyed, their rapid reproduction overwhelming the glades. He advocated for stricter laws on exotic pets, speaking at town halls with a poise beyond his years, his voice echoing Elena's quiet strength. "These snakes aren't villains," he'd say, echoing Jack's words, "but they're destroying what my mother died protecting. We brought them here. It's our job to fix it." His activism caught the eye of national organizations, earning him a scholarship to study wildlife management. But the hunts remained his true calling, each capture a small victory, a way to reclaim power from the creature that had stolen so much. One sweltering summer day, Mateo led a team into a remote hammock, a raised island of hardwoods amid the marshes, following reports of a nesting female. The air was thick with humidity, mosquitoes swarming like dark clouds, but Mateo pressed on, his boots sinking into the peat. They found her, a massive python, 22 feet long, guarding a clutch of eggs the size of softballs. The struggle was epic. The snake struck at them, fangs bared, coils lashing like whips. Mateo hooked her head, his partners pinning the body, sweat pouring as they bagged her. Inside, the bulge wasn't prey, but potential, 50 eggs that would never hatch, preventing hundreds more invaders. The team celebrated with high fives and cold drinks back at base, but Mateo felt a hollow ache, wondering if Elena watched from somewhere, proud or saddened by the necessity. The Everglades challenges mounted. Wildfires in dry seasons scorched habitat, floods in wet ones drowned nests, but the pythons adapted, some even hybridizing with African rock pythons for greater resilience. Mateo collaborated with scientists on genetic studies, swabbing captured snakes for DNA, helping map family lines to target breeding hotspots. He learned to pilot drones for aerial surveys, spotting heat signatures from above, a modern twist on ancient tracking skills. At home, Sofia kept Elena's memory alive with photos and stories, cooking her sister's recipes, arroz con pollo, flan that melted on the tongue, reminding Mateo of the woman behind the legend. He visited her grave often, a simple marker in a cemetery overlooking the glades, leaving flowers and whispering updates. "We got another big one today, Mama. For you." Grief had evolved from raw pain to a quiet companion, fueling his resolve without consuming him. Lila became a steady presence, her camera capturing not just hunts but moments of beauty, sunsets over the prairie, orchids blooming in hidden sloughs, reminding Mateo that the Everglades was worth saving for its wonders, not just its threats. As he approached adulthood, Mateo dreamed of leading his own team, perhaps starting a nonprofit in Elena's name, training the next generation of guardians. The swamp, with its symphony of frogs and owls, its dangers and delights, had shaped him into a man his mother would recognize, fierce, compassionate, unyielding. Yet, whispers of larger pythons persisted, legends of a ghost snake, in the deepest mangroves, a beast that evaded all hunters. Mateo felt drawn to it, a final confrontation brewing, but for now, he focused on the daily battles, each one a step toward healing the land and his heart. The Everglades endured, its cycles unbroken, and Mateo Ramirez walked its paths as both son and sentinel. As Mateo Ramirez stepped into his 20s, the Everglades had woven itself inextricably into the fabric of his existence, a living tapestry of triumph and torment that defined every breath he took. Now 22, with a degree in wildlife biology from the University of Florida under his belt, Mateo had returned to the swamp not as a grieving boy, but as a seasoned leader, founding the Elena Ramirez Foundation for Invasive Species Control. The organization started with seed money from his scholarship and donations sparked by his viral story, trained volunteers in python tracking, hosted educational workshops for schools, and collaborated with state agencies on large-scale removals. His office was a converted trailer at the park's edge, walls lined with maps dotted in red pins for python sightings, shelves groaning under field guides and preserved specimens. Mateo himself had changed, broader shoulders from years of hauling snakes, a tattoo of a coiled python on his forearm encircled by his mother's name in elegant script, and eyes that held the depth of someone who had stared into the abyss of loss and emerged resolute. Lila, now his fiancée after years of shared adventures, worked alongside him as the foundation's photographer and outreach coordinator, her images capturing the raw beauty and brutality of the glades, hunters knee-deep in muck, pythons mid-strike, sunrises over restored marshes where native species were rebounding. They lived in a small house Sophia had helped them buy, with a view of the sawgrass waving like golden banners, a place where Mateo could hear the night's chorus of frogs and feel connected to Elena's spirit. But the work was grueling, endless. For every 100 pythons removed, Mateo's personal tally now over 1,000, the population persisted, adapting to hunts by burrowing deeper or migrating to urban edges where they preyed on pets and livestock. Climate shifts exacerbated the issue. Warmer winters allowed more eggs to survive, hurricanes scattered populations into new territories, and sea level rise created hybrid habitats where pythons thrived alongside saltwater crocodiles. Mateo lobbied in Tallahassee for increased funding, testifying before committees with data slides showing biodiversity loss, 90% decline in small mammals in python-heavy areas, ripple effects up the food chain to birds of prey and panthers. This isn't just about snakes, he'd argue, his voice steady and impassioned. It's about preserving an entire ecosystem, one my mother gave her life to. Lawmakers listened, passing bills for drone surveillance and biocontrol research, but bureaucracy moved slowly, like the sluggish rivers of the glades. In the field, Mateo led elite teams into the heart of the wilderness, expeditions that lasted days, camping on hammocks with airboats moored nearby. One such trip, in the steamy grip of summer, targeted a rumored super nest in a remote cypress dome, whispers from rangers of a female python brood guarding hundreds of eggs. The team, Mateo, Lila, 2 veteran hunters named Carlos and Mia, and a biologist from the USGS, pushed through dense vegetation, machetes hacking at vines, the air thick with the scent of decay and blooming nightshade. They navigated by GPS and instinct, avoiding gator holes and quicksand pits, the sun beating down like a hammer. Nights were spent around campfires, sharing stories. Carlos recounting a close call with a 20-footer that nearly crushed his leg, Mia demonstrating not tying for snake bags, Lila snapping candids that humanized the hunters. Mateo rarely spoke of Elena directly, but her presence lingered in his quiet vigilance, the way he scanned the shadows as if expecting her to emerge. On the 3rd day, they found it, a massive depression under a fallen log, eggs clustered like pale orbs, guarded by not 1 but 3 females, their bodies intertwined in a Gordian knot of scales and muscle. The largest, easily 25 feet, lifted her head with a hiss that chilled the blood, eyes glinting like obsidian. The battle was chaos. Hooks flying, bodies thrashing, the snake's coils slamming into trees with bone-jarring force. Mateo took the lead female, his hook latching behind her jaw as she lunged, her weight dragging him into the mud. Lila shouted warnings, capturing the frenzy on camera, while Carlos and Mia subdued the others. Mia got bitten, fangs sinking into her boot but not piercing skin, a near miss that heightened the adrenaline. They bagged all 3, destroying the eggs, over 200 in total, a haul that could prevent thousands of future pythons. Back at base, the media swarmed. Everglades hero bags record nest, headlines blared, with Mateo's mud-streaked face front and center. He downplayed it in interviews, crediting the team, but inside, satisfaction bloomed. Each removal was a brick in the wall against the invasion, a tribute to Elena. Yet, challenges mounted beyond the snakes. Poachers targeted the Foundation's equipment, stealing drones and cameras, perhaps resentful of the scrutiny on illegal activities in the glades. Mateo installed security, but tension simmered with locals who saw pythons as a boon for hunting tourism or dismissed the threat as hype. Then there was the emotional toll. Nightmares still plagued him, visions of Elena's final moments, the python's Bulge a grotesque symbol in his dreams. Therapy helped, sessions where he unpacked the grief, learning to separate vengeance from stewardship. Lila was his anchor, their engagement a beacon of normalcy. Planning a wedding by the water, vows under a canopy of stars, Sophia beaming as mother of the groom in spirit. The Foundation expanded, partnering with universities for research on python pheromones to lure them into traps, and community programs teaching kids like young Mateo had been to respect and protect the wild. He mentored teens from troubled homes, showing them how purpose could rise from pain, watching their eyes light up at their first capture. One boy, Diego, reminded him of himself, orphaned young, angry at the world, and Mateo took extra time, teaching him tracking skills and life lessons. The swamp doesn't care about fair, but we can make it better. Diego flourished, becoming a junior volunteer, a cycle of healing that honored Elena's legacy. As the years unfolded, Mateo faced a personal crossroads, offers from national parks out west, tempting with new challenges like wolf reintroduction or bear management, but he couldn't leave the Everglades, its pull magnetic, its needs unmet. Instead, he doubled down, securing grants for a mobile lab to study captured pythons on-site, dissecting them for diet analysis, finding remnants of endangered. In the twilight of his life, Mateo Ramirez stood as a living legend amid the Everglades, his hair silvered like the mist rising from the marshes at dawn, his hands gnarled from decades of gripping hooks and steering airboats through treacherous channels. At 65, he had long since passed the torch of daily hunts to younger guardians, but the Elena Ramirez Foundation thrived under his guidance, a beacon of conservation that spanned the globe with chapters in other invaded ecosystems, from Australia's cane toads to Hawaii's brown tree snakes. The Foundation's headquarters, a state-of-the-art facility built on reclaimed land near the original trailer park, buzzed with activity. Labs humming with genetic sequencers analyzing python DNA for vulnerabilities, classrooms filled with eager students learning ecology, and a museum wing dedicated to Elena's story, where visitors gazed at preserved specimens and interactive displays simulating the swamp's delicate balance. Mateo's days were slower now, spent advising on policy, writing memoirs that blended personal loss with scientific insight, and mentoring his grandchildren. Elena's legacy extended through his children with Lila, who had passed 5 years prior from illness, her photographs still adorning the walls like windows to the past. His son, Javier, ran field operations, a spitting image of Mateo in his prime, while daughter Isabella focused on outreach, her TED Talks on invasive species drawing millions of views. The family home, expanded over the years, overlooked the glades, where Mateo sat on the porch each evening, sipping cafecito and listening to the symphony of night sounds, the croak of pig frogs, the hoot of barred owls, the distant splash of a gator. Sophia had passed a decade ago, her ashes scattered in the swamp per her wishes, joining Elena in the eternal flow. The Everglades had transformed under collective efforts. Python numbers, once in the hundreds of thousands, now hovered in the low tens of thousands, thanks to breakthroughs Mateo championed. Pheromone traps that lured males to sterile females, bioengineered viruses targeting snake reproduction without harming natives, and community bounties that turned locals into allies. Native wildlife rebounded. Marsh rabbits hopped in restored prairies, panthers prowled with fuller bellies, birds filled the skies in migratory flocks that blackened the horizon. But victories were hard-won. Climate change persisted as the ultimate foe, warmer temperatures accelerating python breeding cycles, saltwater intrusion salinizing freshwater habitats, forcing adaptive strategies like elevated boardwalks and mangrove replanting. Mateo testified before Congress in his later years, his voice weathered but commanding, advocating for global warming mitigation tied to biodiversity preservation. The snakes were our warning, he'd say, a symptom of human hubris. Ignore the Everglades, and we ignore our own fate. His words influenced legislation, funneling billions into wetland restoration, a testament to one man's ripple effect from tragedy. Yet, personal reflections haunted him. The what-ifs of Elena's last day, the python's bulge a symbol etched in his soul. He visited her memorial often, a bronze statue at the park entrance depicting her with machete in hand, eyes fierce, inscribed with Guardian of the Glades. Tourists posed for photos, unaware of the man who lingered nearby, touching the base with trembling fingers. Javier and Isabella urged him to retire fully, but Mateo couldn't. The swamp was in his blood, its rhythms syncing with his heartbeat. One crisp autumn morning, He embarked on a solo pilgrimage, airboat humming as he navigated familiar channels, the water parting like old friends. Age had slowed him, but instinct remained sharp, spotting a cottonmouth coiled on a branch, a heron spearing fish, the subtle ripple of a hidden python. He wasn't hunting today, just remembering, tracing the path where Elena vanished all those years ago. The mangroves whispered secrets, their roots twisting like memories, and Mateo felt peace, a closure long sought. Parking the boat, he waded ankle-deep, the mud familiar as embrace, and sat on a log, pulling out a faded photo of Elena and young Mateo, smiles bright against the green backdrop. Tears came unbidden, not of sorrow but gratitude, for the life she'd given him, the purpose born from pain. As the sun climbed, casting golden light through the canopy, he spotted movement, a small python, no more than 6 feet, slithering toward a bird's nest. Instinct kicked in. Mateo grabbed a stick, not to kill but to relocate, guiding it away gently. "Go on, find your place," he murmured, knowing eradication was impossible, management the key. The snake vanished into the underbrush, a reminder that balance was ongoing, not absolute. Returning home, Mateo gathered the family for dinner, sharing stories of the day, laughter mingling with lessons. Javier announced a new grant for AI-driven python detection. Isabella showed videos of school kids planting native grasses. The grandchildren listened wide-eyed, one asking, "Abuelo, did you ever catch the ghost snake?" Mateo smiled, recounting the tale with embellishments, turning myth into motivation. That night, in dreams, Elena appeared not as victim but victor, walking beside him in the swamp, her hand on his shoulder. "You did good, mi hijo," she whispered, fading into the mist. Waking with dawn's light, Mateo felt renewed, ready for whatever the glades brought next. His memoirs, published later that year, became a bestseller, Coils of Fate, A Life in the Everglades, weaving personal narrative with calls to action, inspiring a new wave of environmentalists. Awards followed, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, honorary doctorates, but Mateo cherished most the letters from readers, strangers touched by his story, vowing to protect their own wild places. As health declined, he spent more time teaching, virtual classes reaching global audiences, emphasizing empathy and conservation. Understand the invader to defeat it, but never forget the invaded. Family surrounded him in final days, the home filled with love, the swamp sounds a lullaby outside. Mateo's last wish, ashes scattered where Elena's were, reuniting in the waters that bound them. The funeral drew thousands, hunters, scientists, politicians, locals, a procession of airboats gliding through channels, songs echoing over the prairie. Javier spoke, voice breaking. "Dad didn't just fight snakes, he fought for us all." The Everglades absorbed him, as it had Elena, its cycles continuing, floods and fires, births and deaths, a resilient web where human stories intertwined with nature's. The foundation endured, Isabella at the helm, innovating with gene drives and citizen science apps that turned smartphones into tracking tools. Pythons persisted, but controlled, their threat diminished by vigilance. Mateo's legacy lived in restored habitats, in species saved from brink, in the hearts of those he inspired. Children learned his name in schools, a hero not of capes but calluses, proving one life could shift tides. The glades whispered his story in winds through sawgrass, a timeless tale of loss, love, and the unyielding quest for harmony in a wild world. As seasons turned, new guardians patrolled, hooks ready, eyes sharp, carrying forward the flame Mateo ignited from the ashes of tragedy. The single mom's vanishing, the python's bulge, had sparked a movement that echoed eternally, a bulge in the belly of history, birthing hope from horror. And so, the Everglades thrived, a testament to resilience, where every coil unraveled revealed not just danger, but the